Hello there. It seems that everybody nowadays is making vlogs, so I thought I'd start my own vlog. And one of the best things about being a YouTuber, at least for me, is getting to know new people with similar interests. And what I'm going to use this vlog for is answering your questions and talk about creativity, about your interests, about my interests, and I hope you find it interesting and maybe even a little bit educational sometimes. So today I'm going to start off by talking about why I make stop-motion monster movies on YouTube. And, well, let's start at the beginning. I was born in the happy 1970s, way back in 1974. So the late 1970s were my formative years, those years up to the age of 5 or 6 when psychologists say that your brain is molded into the shape it'll stay for the rest of your life. And one afternoon when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, my mom turned on our old black and white TV and this was on. And my reaction was something like this. Now, at that age, my perception of what was real and what was fake was kind of fuzzy. Because if it was on television, it had to be true, right? And so my mom looked at me and she said, "Are you upset?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, I'm going to turn it off then." And I went, "No, don't turn it off." Because I was receiving an equal dose of terror and fascination. I just couldn't stop watching the damn thing, even though I was scared. And this is not just my earliest monster movie memory. It's my earliest memory, period. And this is when, at that exact moment in time, where I became a monster kid for life. I've since found out that the movie in question was Gappa, the Trifibian Monster, which I watch every now and then in a fit of nostalgia. I'm sure you'll not be shocked to hear that I was also a massive dinosaur kid, because if you're into monsters, you're into dinos too. And in the summer of 1979, my parents and I went to one of those outdoor dinosaur park attractions with an assortment of weird-looking giant fiberglass dinos. On our way home, we stopped to buy some drinks and sandwiches, and my parents bought me this comic, which is published originally in 1968 by Western Publishing Company, and it's not based on the 1933 classic movie King Kong, but rather the novel, which was a tie-in to that movie, which is actually in the public domain now, I think. So this comic has stuff that's not in the movie, but which is in the book, like a fight between Kong and 2 triceratopses, and it's lacking stuff from the movie, not in the book, like Kong's attack on a train. The thing is, I had never seen the movie, I didn't know there was a movie, but I loved this comic. Back in those days, Sweden only had 2 TV channels, and after the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve, Channel 1 always showed a Catholic midnight mass from Rome, which hardly anyone ever watched, while Channel 2 always showed an entertaining movie. On New Year's Eve 1979-1980, they showed the classic King Kong, and I was allowed to stay up late and watch it, as I loved the comic book so much. And my mind short-circuited. Now, to put this into context, I had seen stop-motion animation before. In fact, Swedish television children's programming bought bucket loads of stop-motion animated shorts from Eastern Europe, because that was much cheaper than buying the TV rights for cartoons from Disney or Warner Brothers, for example. But these short films were all stop-motion, with characters obviously made from wood and felt, inhabiting worlds obviously made from wood and felt. And those films are fascinating and beautiful in their own right, but what blew my mind about Kong was that actors and stop-motion puppets were interacting. And the puppets did look like puppets, they looked like real animals. And if you're wondering, 2 specific scenes affected me more than any other. Firstly, when Kong first appears, breaking through the forest, and when the Stegosaurus charges the expedition. For some reason, those two scenes still carry a very special magic for me. And the Stegosaur scene is my favorite dinosaur movie moment of all time. So the very next day I recreated my experiences by building a really piss-poor model of Skull Island on a tray, using rocks from the garden, toy trees, and plasticine monsters. I ran out of green plasticine, so my Stegosaurus was all other available colors. And I started drawing Kong over and over, trying to relive the movie in my head. There was something magic about the prehistoric monsters being stop-motion animated, something I couldn't put my finger on, and I still can't. I liked the earlier Japanese kaiju film I had seen snippets of, but for me, the stop-motion animation of King Kong was much more appealing than the suitmation of that earlier film experience. The late 1970s was really a good time for me, with lots of wonderful TV movie memories. I watched Alexander Korda's The Thief of Baghdad, Tarantula, the classic Universal monster movies, Errol Flynn movies, and the occasional weird Russian fairy tale film. Then some years later, my next big stop-motion revelation occurred. We had bought our first VHS player, and we rented a movie called Clash of the Titans. And again, my mind was blown. I was a huge mythology buff at the time. I had lots of books on the subject. And seeing creatures like Medusa and Pegasus come to life in that colorful Greek mythology world was endlessly fascinating to me. Also, that these monsters interacted with other characters in such a dynamic way, becoming characters themselves, was nothing short of magical. Eventually, Swedish TV showed Jason and the Argonauts, and I recognized the name Harryhausen. My parents started buying Starlog for me at a local newsagent's. The 100th issue had an article about Ray Harryhausen, and it became my quest to hunt down every film he had been involved in. That quest was fulfilled in 1986 when I visited my dad, who had moved to the United States, and I emptied Blockbuster Video of every Harryhausen title they had. So what about Star Wars, which seems to have been such a pivotal movie for many people? Well, I actually didn't see Star Wars until it came out on video in Sweden in 1983, and it did make a big impact on me. I had the toys, I read the comic books, and I immersed myself in the Star Wars universe in any way I could. But more than anything, Star Wars and the articles about the series in Starlog convinced me that I could actually make a living creating monsters and other effects for movies. In the 1980s, with the advent of the blockbuster movie, there came a slew of marvelous films with equally marvelous special effects, all of them practical and handmade. It seemed that this cinematic avalanche of awesomeness would never end, and I started preparing myself for entering the FX business. In 1986, I finally made my very first own movie, and I had a friend of mine dress up as a knight in cardboard armor, fighting a badly animated, badly built stop-motion monster created out of pipe cleaners and bits of paper. This 3-minute epic was made in Super 8, and I was extremely disappointed with the results. But about sometime around this time, I got hold of this excellent issue of the magazine Cinemagic, where sculptor, artist, and stop-motion animator John Dodds interviews special effects maestro Jim Danforth about his work on the movie When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. In this article, Danforth talks about how he created his dinosaur puppets using foam muscles and latex skins, and that's how I then started to build puppets. And it is how I still make my puppets. Since then, I've actually talked to Danforth online, and I am now a Facebook buddy with John Dodds. So the internet is not only bad. I kept experimenting with my Super 8 animations well up into the early 1990s, but by then the film stocks had become too expensive for me, and I switched to analog video, borrowing cameras from relatives and friends. But this meant no more stop-motion animations. I couldn't do it with an analog video camera. So instead I started doing monster makeups afflicting my friends and sometimes myself with cotton, tissue paper, and latex. Still, you could see the stop motion influence creep into some of my makeups. After finishing high school, I was dead set on joining my dad in the United States and somehow, in some way, find a way into the professional filmmaking business and work with creating all those wonderful, practical, handmade special effects, like stop motion animation, like monster suits, and like model work. And then nobody wanted stop motion animation or puppets or practical effects anymore. And I was advised to go back to school and educate myself about how to make computer-generated animation. And I said, no way, I'm not doing it. And I didn't. So I stayed on in Sweden and I took whatever jobs I could to support myself, and I kept developing my skills as a sculptor, as an artist, as animator, puppet builder, and kept on doing all these things as a hobby. Except that for me it wasn't a hobby. It was a sincere passion. And in 1998 I got my first home computer, and sometime later the very first edition of Stop Motion Pro. I also bought my first own video camera, and I could finally get back into stop motion animation. Eventually I discovered YouTube, and it has since then become the home of my little films. And I'm so very grateful that I have been able to find an audience for my films here. And I have also made lots of friends with other passionate filmmakers. I make my films as often as I can, and depending on what resources I have at the making of a film, it'll turn out for better or worse. But there is something that I hope will always shine through, and that is my sincere love for stop motion and monsters. For those of you who think this is a childish fascination, compare it to those who love sports or opera or any other focused form of human expression. It's the same thing. It goes beyond simply being entertained by something. It is a vital part of my life essence. And I will keep doing it for as long as I or anyone out there gives a shit. So this is my little stop motion studio. And why not round off this vlog by giving you a short guided tour. So hang on. So, what you can see here is my tiny animation stage, and with some puppets and stuff on. If you turn over that stage the puppets are standing on and the green background behind them, it'll actually turn into a blue screen stage. And here's my equally humble PC laptop, which I use to edit all my films on. And here the puppets are starting to queue up. To the left there is actually a autographed image of Harryhausen, don't you know? And as you can see, they are the puppets are kind of spilling out all over the shelves as well as the floor. And I'm trying to figure out how to store them better. These books and magazines, by the way, are all about movies, stop motion animation, and other effects work. What else? There's Gandalf's hat. That bird is a really old puppet. There's a sleepy cat. And another sleepy cat. Or maybe not so sleepy. This, by the way, is my very old Macintosh, which I mainly use to create Photoshop backgrounds for my movies. I got it off my former job at a newspaper, actually, as a little benefit. What you see here is a pretty messy stack of plastic and cardboard boxes, and you also see the wardrobe behind them. They're containing the props and costumes from my movies. And I also use the Macintosh, by the way, to color ink illustrations I make for DeviantArt and some of my book projects and other book projects. This is fan art from Stephen King's Crouch End, short story. And hey, there's Dean Stockwell from the Dunwich Horror, 1970s AIP horror movie. These big things, by the way, here's one and there is another one. They're my softbox lights, which are indispensable for me when making my stop motion animations. And here's another shelf of old and some new puppets. I made over 100 puppets by now, by the way. I don't have all of them. Some of them I made for other people, and some of them are simply gone. They have deteriorated so badly because of the natural degrading and breaking down process of latex mainly, and I've thrown them away. And some puppets I actually have stored in plastic boxes and drawers. There we go. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this little vlog, because I intend to make more of them. And if you really have enjoyed this video and the other videos on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. And if you really like them, please consider supporting the making of more videos like this one and my other videos over at my Patreon campaign. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon again.